Parshat Bo means to go or to come. There's a lot in here. We know this is a big Parsha. We have Pesach come from this. We have some mitzvahs that are still going on today and that were one-time mitzvahs as well. The mitzvah of the Israelites standing ready to go with staff in hand. Eat in haste. We don't do that now, right? We don't do that. We now commemorate sitting down and reclining and taking our time. So that was like a one-time deal. But we also get, toward the end of the Parsha, tefillin. Now, mind you, we know this is before Sinai. So the laying on of tefillin is a mitzvah before Mount Sinai and the giving of Torah. How important is that? That seems pretty important to me. We have the Passover, we have the Paschal Lamb, and so what I'm going to focus on today is the final plague, which is the death of the firstborn. Okay, so I'm going to go to Exodus 29. And so what I want to talk about is how important is the plague of the firstborn? How important does this affect us today? Has it gone through history? Is this a big deal? Or did it just something that we just say, hey, this happened way back when, yay, Israel got to leave Egypt as a result of this and didn't stop? Or was this plague something that affected us, Israel, all the way through history? And we're going to talk about that. Because even today, there's things happening today that reminds us of this. So, we go to Exodus 12, and I'm going to start at verse 11 because this is the time of the Passover. Here's how you are to eat it. Eat the lamb, the Paschal lamb, with your belt fastened, your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and you are to eat it hurriedly. It is Adonai's Pesach, or Passover. This is the one-time deal. We don't do this anymore. Okay? For that night, verse 12, I will pass through the land of Egypt and kill all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both men and animals, and I will execute judgment against all the gods of Egypt. I am Adonai. The blood will serve as a sign marking the houses where you are, when I see the blood, I will pass over, or pasach, you, and when I strike the land of Egypt, a death blow will not strike you. So, this is a commandment that's given. And when we're talking about this commandment, and we're talking about the death of the firstborn in Egypt, did it affect just the Egyptians? Would it affect those that were, say, from Canaan, living in Egypt at the time? In the Midrash Tanchuma, Parshat Bo, they talk about it. The sages talk about it. They say this, and it came to pass in the middle of the night that the Lord smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt. This is Exodus 12:29. The Creator of the night divided the night precisely. The Lord smote all the firstborn. It was the Lord himself who smote the firstborn, not his emissary, Moshe. In fact, even though a man was elsewhere and his firstborn was in Egypt, he died. In other words, if your son was living in Egypt and you were living in Canaan, your son still died while you were in Canaan. How do we know that the firstborn of the Cuthites, the Puthites, and the Ludites were also slain? It is said, and smote all the firstborn in Egypt, the firstfruits of their strength in the tents of Ham. That's in Psalm 78:51. Only the firstborn of the Pharaoh remained alive in the fulfillment of the verse. However, it was for this that I raised you up, talking about Pharaoh. Exodus 9:16. And Baal Zephon was the only idol remaining to mislead them. In fulfillment of the verse, he increaseth the nations and destroys them, or destroyeth them. Now, how far does this go? Did it just affect the hierarchy of Egypt? How far does this go down the social scale, if you will? Unto the firstborn of the captives, which is also in Exodus 12:29. Why were the firstborn of the captives punished? Because they had rejoiced in the decrees promulgated against Israel. Hence it is written, he that is glad at calamity shall not be unpunished. That's Proverbs 17:5. You must not be of the opinion that only the captives reacted in that manner, for the slaves and handmaidens did likewise, as it is said, even unto the firstborn of the maidservants that is behind the mill. That is, even those who were legally bound to the millers, even their firstborn cattle were destroyed, lest the people assert other deities are powerful, and that is why punishment was imposed upon them. All right, so in other words, it's a long way of saying this, but it affected everybody who was in Egypt, Egyptian or not. If you were living outside of Egypt and your firstborn son lived in Egypt, your firstborn son died. This affected everybody. Did it affect the Israelites if they didn't put the blood on the door? Yes, it did. And how do we know this? We know this from the Talmud, Bava Kama, 60a. Rav Yosef taught a Baraita. What is the meaning of that which is written in regard to the plague? And none of you shall go out of the opening of his house until morning, which is Exodus 12:22, which means once you go in with the blood on the mezuzot, thank you, and the lintel, if the plague was not decreed upon the Jewish people, why were they not permitted to leave their homes? Once permission is granted to the destroyer to kill, it does not distinguish between the righteous and the wicked. And not only that, but it begins with the righteous first, as it is stated in the verse, and will cut off from you the righteous and the wicked. And that's Ezekiel 21:8, where mention of the righteous precedes the wicked. So that's saying that if somebody from Israel did not put that on their mezuzot and their lintel, their firstborn died. So you had to obey. The animals, they were killed too, right? The firstborn of the animals, which we were having a discussion on in adult education. It seemed like there was a lot of animals killed in Mitzrayim at the time, and there were. Rabbeinu Bachya in Shemot 11:5 states this, and the firstborn of every domestic animal, if a man sinned, what did the animals do that they too had to pay the penalty? The reason the firstborn animals had to die was because the Egyptians had made deities of them. When God exacts retribution from a nation, he commences by punishing their livestock first. And our sages in Bereshit Rabbah 96 explain that just as the worshipers are punished, so are those being worshipped. So, yeah, there's a lot here when we're talking about the death of the firstborn. So here's the question that I'm going to kind of propose. Why was the firstborn a thing? Why did Hashem say your firstborn? Because you would think that Hashem might come up with another secondborn. Why did he choose the firstborn? Because if you notice that in the Torah, that this is stated a lot. Firstborn, 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 firstborn. When it even comes to Egypt just in itself. So you have like Exodus 9. Go to Exodus 9. Hashem states, nevertheless, I am going to make him hard-hearted, and you refuse to let the people go. Then you are to tell Pharaoh, Adonai says, Israel is my firstborn son. This is actually Exodus 4. So what is Hashem is saying here or as I just stated, Israel is my firstborn son. I have told you to let my son go in order to worship me, but you have refused to let him go. Well, then I will kill your firstborn son. So here's the thing. Why did Hashem choose firstborn son? Or firstborn? Is because Israel is considered the firstborn of Hashem. It's stated right here. We just saw it. And so if anybody kills those from Israel, it is like killing the firstborn of Hashem. And so when Egypt put them under slavery, when they were, throwing baby boys into the Nile River, they were killing Hashem's firstborn. And so what does Hashem say? Well, if you're going to do that, I'm going to kill your firstborn. How about that? And not only of your sons, your animals too. I'm going to take care of it all. Now, it's pretty tricky here. How many firstborns died? Slade made mention to this last week. Is that what is, if we're saying the firstborn, would you say that, the Egyptians were, good on their marriage? They didn't have any side people, they were good. They were monogamous. Yes, were they? No. They had a lot of wives. Baby mamas, okay, fair enough. And so here's the thing. If a woman had multiple fathers of their children, let's just say, that woman could potentially have multiple kids die. Potentially. If a father had multiple wives, he could have multiple kids that died. This is far-reaching. Ergo, when it says there wasn't a cry that wasn't heard in Egypt, man, there was a lot. There was a lot of death here. So when we look at this, Israel, more importantly, Israel's firstborn, was saved by the blood of the Lamb. Right? This is the redemption that happened. So now, when we now go further in Torah, we are going to see the firstborn. Hashem says the firstborn are mine. Where just before our Parsha ends, in Shemot 13, Hashem says to Moshe, set aside for me all the firstborn, whatever is first from the womb among the people of Israel, both of humans and of animals, belongs to me. So as a result of the obedience of those from Israel did, and by the way, the obedience of the heir of Rav that obeyed, right? We had an heir of Rav that followed Israel out. Those from Egypt that put the blood on the doorposts, were their firstborn saved? Yes, they were. Yes, they were. It also goes in comparison, or in the opposite. Those from Israel that didn't put the blood on the doorpost their firstborn were not saved. Right. According to some interpretations of the word of armed coming out of Egypt, 1/5 came out of Egypt. So now that we have this, so when we look at the understanding, what is now the firstborn supposed to do? Right, they are to be the firstborn sons in Shemot 22. It is you are to say with your the firstborn of your sons are given to me. You are to do the same with your oxen and your sheep. It is to stay with me, or stay with its mother 7 days, and on the 8th day you are to give it to me. But I'm going to stop at this point and talk about who was supposed to be the priesthood of Hashem. The firstborn. Why? We were talking about the firstborn you're set aside for me. The firstborn are consecrated to me. Your firstborn are supposed to be mine. Or they are mine. They're not supposed to be. They are. And so when we look at this, you look at it and you see that the firstborn are supposed to be Hashem. So therefore, they're supposed to be the ones that are supposed to be taking care of the temple, the tabernacle. And then what happened? What happened? The golden calf. Ugh. So you had those from Israel, the golden calf. The golden calf, and we'll get to that. Israel, all of the tribes of Israel, except for one tribe, participated with this golden calf event. And who were they? The Levites. In fact, the Levites, they were pretty zealous, if you will. Right? So when Moshe came down, Hashem says, look what's happening down there. Go down. Moshe came down. When Moshe saw that the people were getting out of control because Aaron had allowed them to get out of control, thanks Aaron, to the derision of their enemies, Moshe stood at the entrance of the camp and shouted this, whoever is for Adonai, come to me. And all the descendants of Levi rather rallied around Moshe. And he told them, here's what the Adonai, the God of Israel, says. Each of you put his sword on his side and go up and down the camp from gate to gate, and every man is to kill his own kinsman, his own friend, and his own neighbor. This is what did the sons of Levi do? Well, sons of Levi did what Moshe said, and that day 3,000 of people died. Levites were like, we ain't having this, Moshe. What do you want us to do? Oh, okay, let's do it. They were good. They were just like, they didn't do it. So what happened? Okay, Moshe said here in Exodus 32, verse 29, you have consecrated yourselves today to Adonai, because every one of you have been against his own son and against his own kinsman in order to bring a blessing on yourselves today. He was talking to Levi. So now, instead of the firstborn of the tribes having the opportunity, the privilege, if you will, to serve Hashem in the tabernacle, the Levites now get that honor. So when we move forward, what is to happen now when you have more firstborn from the tribes versus Levites? Numbers 3, verse 44. The Lord said to Moses, take the Levium, or the Levites, in place of all the firstborn among the people of Israel, and the cattle of the Levites in place of their cattle, and the Levites are to belong to me. Now, and this is during the counting, since there were 273 more firstborn males from Israel than male Levites, in order to redeem them, you are to take 5 shekels for each of these, sanctuary shekel, which is equal to 20 gerahs. Give the redemption money for these extra people to Aharon and his sons. Now, if you have too many sons in Israel, you have to redeem your firstborn son. 5 shekels you're supposed to pay. Now, we move forward. We go to Yeshua's time. Was this still honored? Even with the first temple, you had the temple, not the temple, you had the Mishkan, or the tabernacle, then you have the first temple, and then you're now in the second temple times. Does this still happen? Yes, it does. It's still being followed. It's still being commanded. And it's still being honored. When the time came, this is in Luke chapter 2, verse 22, when the time came for the purification according to the Torah of Moshe, they took him, Yeshua, up to Jerusalem to present him to Adonai, as is written in the Torah of Adonai, every firstborn male is to be consecrated to Adonai, and also to offer a sacrifice of a pair of doves and 2 young pigeons as required by Torah. This is called the Pidyon Ben, the redemption of the firstborn. And it's still followed. And this is all a result from what? The plague of the firstborn. You can see how it comes along. It follows, right? If you obeyed Hashem back then, your firstborn was consecrated. Ended up soon being the Levites. So today, we're coming to today. Does it matter? Does it still matter today? Is it still followed today? Well, we can't really do it because we have no temple. But are there some observant out there in Israel that still commemorate it? It's a thing. It's still commemorated. Even to today, which was like 3,500 years after the event, it still matters. And it's still commanded. And so I'm just, as I'm going on and as I'm talking about this point, is that Torah is eternal and Torah still matters today. That this redemption of the firstborn from the consecration of the firstborn of the blood of the Lamb, because of, well, not because of, but as a result of the plague of the firstborn, right? If you listen to Hashem, good things happen. Shabbat Shalom.